Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix, and we are back in live. Sorry for the major delay tonight, but uh shit got crazy here with the weather pretty quickly. So I'm actually in a remote location doing tonight's show. And yeah, things kind of went off. Uh we had this major, like, ping pong ball size hailstorm come ripping through here. And I literally had to I had to stop what I was doing, get my car, move it, and find an overhang for it, and then hang out there for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes or so, and then maneuver back and try to get everything set up again. It was very intense. And apparently, this is not the only part of the state of Texas, but there are other parts of the United States experiencing some very extreme weather. So there's some very extreme things going on right now. I have some footage of the Schumann frequency, and it is freaking off the charts. And I am no expert in this area. Yeah, I know a little bit, right? But tonight I think what we'll try to do is maybe see if we can correlate some of this really crazy, intense Earth energy with the Schumann frequency, and maybe we could align with some astrology that might be worth looking at. But there's something big going on right now, and it's not just with the Schumann frequency and the weather. I've been tracking a number of reports of planes that are being deployed in different areas, and some of which are in places that they've never been and probably shouldn't be unless something significant was going on. I've also seen some reports of things like on the ground presence of military in Canada. So what is going on here, right? We have this crazy Schumann frequency kind of blow up. All the planets are also aligned, like everything is visible right now. And again, you'll see them almost like a string, like a line of lights on the string. And of course, Venus and Mars are within very close proximity of each other. There's a lot happening. There's a lot happening. We also have the nodes are about to change. And for me, when the nodes change, or just before the nodes change, things get really weird. Anytime there's a major movement with one of the outer planets or the nodes, whatever happens just before they flip, there's an unusual amount of activity. And some of it can be, I wouldn't say necessarily positive or negative, but it's certainly traceable. So when we look at the nodes, the true node is in Taurus. And what do we know about Taurus? It's Earth. Like, we are now in those final degrees of the true node in Taurus. Finally came off at 3. We're at 2 now. So it's 2, 1, and then 29 Aries. So we're going to get into some of that tonight. The final degrees of Taurus, the ingress into Aries, which I think is very significant in terms, I mean, again, we can even see, the fingerprints of this ingress and this transmission, or this transition from a Taurus into Aries. It's a big deal, really big deal. We'll get into it tonight. We're also going to look at, and not only just the true node in Aries, but where we're headed in 2026 when Saturn ingresses into Aries with Neptune there in Aries as well. So Saturn and Neptune are they're shadowing each other at the end of 2025. And by the time we get into 2026, they're both moving together. It's like very rare that this happens. It's a really singular, rare occurrence. So that's coming in 2020, end of 2025. So when we go have when the true north is into Aries, we're having a bit of a precursor for that time. And of course, we have these two eclipses, and they're coming right through this part of the country. One in October at our event here in Kerrville, and that's going to be on the 13th, Friday the 13th, Saturday the 14th, and Sunday the 15th. And we saw some rooms available. I'm actually quite surprised. They're probably the last rooms available in Kerrville, honestly, for this event. And if you're going to go to the event, then you're going to want to secure your room. I'll have more information on that at the end of the show, and then I'll have more information on the event itself this week. And I'm going to be sending out information to the email list, both the members and the subscribers. So we're getting close here, and I'm putting all the final details together, the cost and pricing and everything. So I'll have my figure this week, and then it'll go out. And I try to keep everything reasonable, but there are expenses that I have to pay. And you're going to be coming here for a singular event. Like you'll be able to say you survived the lunar eclipse of October 2023. So solar eclipse, penumbral solar eclipse. We hope. The weather's been so intense, really, really intense. Like I don't ever remember it being this just hot, humid. Would be the word that would describe the weather. Let's see. Torpid. Yeah, torpid. It's kind of, you don't want to do anything, right? The definition of torpid: sluggish, functioning or acting, having lost motion or the power of exertion. It's definitely a torpid atmosphere. They have images associated with torpid. For all you dog lovers out there, here's according to Merriam-Webster. Where's that dog image? Where is it? This is what torpid looks like, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary. Right there. That's torpid. Lazy, numbed, paralyzed. It is a derivative corresponding to the state of torpere. To be numb, lack sensation, to be struck, most sluggish, lethargic. To become stiff, lose feeling, fall asleep. Well, the weather is torpid. I don't know if the energy is. It's a weird combination, really weird combination of that weather that doesn't make you really want to do anything, to feeling like something is definitely staticky and electric in the air. I mean, the hail was crazy. And, we've had hail here before. I mean, it's not like it's my first rodeo with hail, but man, it came fast, and it was, it's really interesting when I've noticed this, when there is a huge shift in the weather, when it goes from being like super hot and then the temperature drops and then the hail hits, there's this weird smell of like cow shit in the air. And I've noticed it before. There was one time when I was up by Georgetown and in Texas, it was really hot, probably like 101, 102. We're playing a baseball tournament, and all of a sudden I just have this stench of cow shit in the air, right? It's like, where's this coming from? It wasn't here before. And then right after that, it just starts coming down and hailing. Same thing happened today. I was at the HEB gas station. It was a weird moment at the HEB gas station. So I'm sitting there and I'm waiting, and there's this guy who's in front of me, and he's in his truck, and he's just hanging out in his truck for a while. And I'm like, did he come? Did he go? What's his story? Should I walk up there and ask him if he's okay? Because I kind of saw his legs dangling a little bit out of the cab of the truck. And I said, no, I'm just gonna leave this guy alone. And he gets out of the truck and then he walks, I'm in the car and he walks over to me and he says, I just got here. I'm like, okay. And well, you're waiting. I said, yeah, I know. I'm waiting. It's kind of how it works, right? You get here, I wait for you to do your thing and then you do your thing and then I leave. That's how it works. Didn't quite say that, but that was kind of how I felt. And he was a weird looking guy. He was a little shit faced, but there was some strange kind of telepathic thing going on, right? Because he knew that there was something weird about his like not doing anything in the truck and me picking up on the fact that this guy isn't doing anything. And I don't think I'm going to go over there and ask him if he's okay or like what's going on here. So it was weird. And he seemed a little shit faced. And then I'm like, okay, is this guy going to be long? And my thought was, no, he's not going to be long at all. And he had a big, Dodge Ram or F-150, one of these Texas trucks. And sure enough, he wasn't there very long at all. He might have put $10 worth of, I don't know, diesel or gas or whatever he's putting in his truck. $10. That was it. Like, oh, all right. But it was just strange. It was like this strange kind of telepathic thing, but I could smell the horse shit in the air or the cow shit or whatever. I could smell it. It was like, oh, something's coming. Something's in the air. So, well, we're getting into it a little bit tonight. There's some other things we're going to talk about. We're going to get back into Trump a little bit. And again, I think he's in trouble. I think that this is, and I just read this admonition of a politician, the admonition of a politician talking about our everyday contrition. No, is that right? Could be. Who is this? Let's see. Let me see if I can find this. Yeah, this we're going to get into the Schumann frequency thing. Wow. It's a big wow. Okay, let me see if I can find this. Let's see, what else do we have? There's something going on, man. There's a lot of high strange and paranoia. A lot of high strange and paranoia kind of in the air. Let me see if I can find this. Stacey Plaskett. She's a congresswoman. And this is
having Trump not only
this is what I'm referring to. And this gets into the transit of Mars in Trump's 12th house. I think he's whoever he is, whatever he is, I think he's in trouble. And I think this Mars transit we're going to look at tonight with this chart again needs to be discussed. So we're going to get into that tonight. The other thing we're going to get into tonight is one of my favorite subjects, and that's millennials. And I'm going to get into millennials tonight, and I'm going to talk about what I consider to be like the downside of being a millennial and what I consider to be the potential upside to being a millennial. It's a very difficult generation to be born under. And we're going to look at the three key astrological dynamics for being a millennial. And so we're going to talk about that tonight, because I think we're getting to a place now where millennials are in their late 30s and moving into their early 40s. So the first millennials really show up like late 1984, when Pluto goes into Scorpio. So they're 39 years old. So the oldest millennial is approaching 40. And so, yeah, next year, 2024, the oldest millennial will be 40 years old. which is an interesting thought in and of itself. Now, we'll get into that tonight. We'll look at when Pluto was in Capricorn, and if you're in the millennial mix, it's a very, I think in some ways they share some qualities with the generation that is born between 1963 and 1969. A very that's a really small slice, 62 to 69. And what they share are the conjunctions of the two outer planets, different outer planets though. In 62 to 69, it was Pluto in Virgo and Uranus in Virgo. In 1984 to 96, about 12 years, it's primarily Neptune in Capricorn and Uranus in Capricorn. So both of those subsets share those two outer planets in conjunction in two signs. So we'll talk about the millennials tonight and why I think a lot of what is going on here on the planet is in many ways up to the millennials. In many ways up to the millennials. Not completely, not entirely, but in many ways up to them. And we're going to I'm also going to take a little drive-by with Generation A, because they're starting to make their presence felt. They are starting to make their presence felt. Or recently, there was a school, I think somewhere in New England, and the kids did a counter protest about Pride Week. And this is I would say that protest is probably the first sort of collective look into Gen A. So these are middle school kids, born, circa 2010, 2011. So they're going to be 12, 13 years old. And they're the first wave of what we call Gen A or Generation Alpha. Right. So I'm going to talk about them a little bit tonight, too, because on Friday's show, it was a great show, by the way. If you haven't seen it, Christopher Gardner was on and we covered a lot of topics. I mean, he has just a wide breadth of experience and knowledge. And, we could go in any number of directions. And we did, and we probably just scratched the surface of things. But one of the things we talked about was his daughter, who is 3 years old and really qualifies as being part of Gen A. And we talked about Gen A to a certain extent. And I'm not down on any of these generations, although I do think that the millennials, with their kind of all or nothing, like if the millennials get their all moving in one direction, I think they could be really powerful. They're already powerful. They're already being put into positions of influence and power, some of whom I think have real issues. And when we get into, those two outer planets, Uranus and Neptune and Capricorn, that's what we'll talk about. And I've been talking about this. This isn't anything I haven't shared before, but I'm sharing it tonight because I think it's pretty significant, because they're now really getting put into positions of power. And maybe it's not the best of breed. Maybe the millennials who, are interested in power are not in that world. I mean, real power, true power, not fake political, cultural, Marxist power, the power gained through diversity, or the power gained through some kind of, monetary act of inclusiveness. But we have to have these people now because we have to satisfy our stakeholders, and we have to abide by equity. Anytime you get into a situation like that, you are not hiring people who are the best for the job. And it may look good on your DIE sheet or whatever, DEI sheet or SEI, but when people get hired based on some kind of preference versus who the best person is for a job. You know, a true, you know, I wouldn't say we've always had a true meritocracy, but we've had more of a meritocracy than other places. And I know because I you know, I was part of it, right? I was in corporate America for a little bit, you know, it was .com corporate America. And for all intents and purposes, I was older. I was 40 years old when I started. In my experience in that world was, if you could get the job done, you'd stick around, you get paid, and you'd be able to keep your job even when companies would go through acquisitions and, you know, they'd have to downsize. Like every time that happened, I was always along for the ride. And it wasn't because I was privileged. You know, I worked my ass off. So, I mean, my experience in that setting was, yeah, for the most part, pretty much meritocracy. And I also saw people who did not put in the requisite amount of work in various instances. Like in one case, somebody who was a really smart guy, but didn't really know his niche. His main niche was that his high school buddy hired him. And he was a really smart guy, but he was one of these people that kind of played political office games. And I'm like, that's not how you get it done. Right. Like, you know, I was like if it was Survivor, I was the guy in Survivor that everybody kind of wanted to have in the tribe, but never really saw as much of a threat. I was kind of that guy, like, oh yeah, we want him. But I was never I was never like trying to get anybody's job or gig or anything. Like, just do your fucking job. And, you know, whatever happens will happen. If you do good work, you'll do good work. Pretty simple. I didn't see everybody do that though. And there were a couple of people who, there's this one guy, okay. This one guy I worked with, and I worked with him in San Diego. And he had his pod right next to mine. And that's what they called them back then, pods. It was a cubicle. His cubicle was on the other side of mine. And this was a guy who was part of a pretty well-known hip hop group from the early 90s. I'm not going to mention the name of the group or the guy, but to me, he was always a cool guy. You know, we would talk about sports and music, but he always fucked around. Like he was always walking around. He was always bullshitting here, bullshitting there, you know, stirring his coffee, or you know somebody like that, right? That's all he ever did. And eventually, and he was hired because there was a time where excuse me, the company needed some cachet. Just needed some cachet. Like, oh yeah, there's this guy. Oh, he's with you? Yeah. Oh, wow, cool, right? I mean, it was one of those, and there were a couple other guys that were like that too, but some of those guys worked really hard. Like there was this other guy who was, I'm not going to mention the name of the band, but they were from Philadelphia, and they had a song about all you faceless fill in the blanks. It was a guy from that band, and he was fucking great. He worked his ass off. This other guy, though, eventually the cachet wore out, and then he was gone, right? So bringing it all back to, you know, what's going on mostly with the millennials is that they're being rewarded more for who they are than what they can do. And that's problematic. It's problematic in terms of, and I'm not saying all of them, there's some very capable millennials. So I have to put an asterisk here when these are millennials who are being promoted through inclusivity and through basically the corporate social credit score, not just corporations, but also in terms of governance. Like there was this young woman who was being interviewed in Washington, and she was being put in charge of, I don't know, some federal group that controls like plastics or the development of plastics. And the guy who was, you know, it was one of these typical Washington, D.C., you know, grill fests, right? It's like they just put a person up there And one side, it's like one side turns them over to cool, and the other side turns them over to roast, right? Cool, roast, cool, roast. It's almost like some fucking kind of like trauma-based exercise. It's sort of like, oh yeah, you're mean. Oh yeah, oh, we love you. Oh yeah, you're mean. Oh yeah, we love you. Right. What's that going to do to a person? Whoever loves them, they're going to gravitate more towards them than these nasty people who are calling them out. That, like, that in and of itself seems like a bit of a technique, right? To kind of season them up before they get in there, if they do get in there. But they had this one woman, she didn't know shit. Like, this guy was grilling her on her glasses. They're plastic. And everything that she had on her body, from her clothes to her shoes to what's inside of her cell phone, it's all plastic. And she didn't even know it, right? She did not even know it. So what they do is, and again, it's kind of like, even though she was a very late Gen Xer, I would probably put her ideologically and spiritually in the Gen Y mode, in the millennial mode. And that's Alyssa Hirscheider, the exec for Bud Light, who promoted Dylan Mulvaney, right? That's kind of where she is. She's really late Gen X. I'd put her in Gen Z. I'm sorry, Gen Y. I got to get it together. Gen Y. And what does she do? She just went on what she thought would be the most inclusive and sort of brightening up the image idea for Bud Light. And it's all ideological, right? And this is one of the things, I'll get into it more with the millennials. It's a very interesting kind of relationship with culture, but they're being promoted now, and they're being promoted on the back of these corporate credit scores or BlackRock's ESG score, right? So I don't think it's great. I'm just being upfront and honest, because a lot of the millennials who I think are really worth their salt are probably not going to go in that direction. They're probably not going to go into that space where all of a sudden the EPA wants to hire them, or they're one of Biden's appointees. The ones who are worth their salt aren't going to do that. They may build something or create something new outside of the system. But so we'll get into that with the millennials. And we've got the true node in Aries. That's all coming. And I think we're in a pretty interesting flux, actually, as these nodes are about to shift. So, all right, let's get into it. Let me see who's here tonight. I haven't connected with you guys for a while. And again, thanks for being here and being patient. I really appreciate it. Let's see. We got Jesse Nothing 33. What's up, Jesse? Meow meow kitty poop. Good evening. There's my man Ryan. Ryan, thanks for hanging out. Queen Lisa in the house. What's going on, Queen Lisa? Good to see you. LMM, the great Leela Marie, she's here. Susie Gemini, Nancy Carroll, Amy Gill. Egypt had a big sandstorm today. Man, some shit is happening. I work outside in that humidity. It is hell. It is really bad. Really bad. Let's see. Siblia Delphos, next to eclipses. Yes, crossing it at 2324 USA from coast to coast. Well, the one in October will come down from Oregon and then basically swing through and come right through the middle of where I am currently sitting. Literally currently sitting. I'm coming to you from the apex and the epicenter of both eclipses. Now, the difference between the one in October and the one in April 2024 is that the April one will come up through Mexico, through the exact same place, and then swing right? So we have the one from Oregon coming in at 30, it's the 33rd state, comes right in and then hangs down this way. And then the other one comes up from Mexico and then winds up in Nova Scotia. So there you go. Let's see, who else do we have here? Listen well 99, geoengineered, feels that way. Call Val Deberon, oppressive. It is oppressive. Jessica Hunt says it's freezing in Ohio for this time of year. Interesting. There she is, a lovely and talented one. Dr. Joan S. There she is. Chris and Steve, the Crimmies are here. There's Bo, Kabuki Theater. Sandra Jackshaw, ASJ. Nancy Carroll, got a new countertop dishwasher and had to reorganize my kitchen. Well, if that's the worst of your worries, Nancy Carroll, you're doing all right. Julie Sunshine 333, the big cat lady's here. Listen, well, 99 says we've had cold temps at night, and when the sun comes out, extra hot. Man, it is scorching. Fantastic. What's going on, CC? Let's see. Queen Lisa says, been gutting it out, getting my home pared down, been brutal. Lots of opportunity to wail out my angst. Dusty Blue, I'm still coughing up a lung in New York with all the fire smoke from Canada. Got mullein nettles to make tea. Good job, Dusty Blue. Keep those lungs in shape. Wow. What happened to Leela? Something happened to Leela? I need the Leela scoop. Let's see. Miami, I've been energized. I'm out all day in the humidity. That's great. In Spanish, when we call people dumb, we say torpe. I think this weather can make you a little dumb. Amy Gill, I scraped my agenda of pressure washing today and chilled in sun, relaxed. Now that is a good, man, just kind of go with it, right? Catherine Rosen. Hi, Catherine. Good to see you here. The scaled raven. Hello from New Mexico. Well, hello back at you and to you. Let's see. You needed a mental break. I was on Rumble last week. If I'm not here, I'm usually on Rumble. Put my Rumble link in the show description. Let's see. Leela's grumpy pants. Yep. I had a little grumpy pants this weekend. Went to the rodeo last night. Fuck, was it hot. It was hot and humid. Man. Like, they have this guy who's a world famous rodeo clown. And God, that just must be a hell of a job. He's like in the Rodeo Hall of Fame. This guy's really funny. But I bet it was really hot. Fake weather. Well, what isn't faked at this point? That's what I have to say. Let's see who else we have. Satan's ass gas. Oh, somebody just bought an astrology course. Cool. I got a good astrology course, by the way, and it's at a really good price. Let's see. 16 hours, all downloadable. Steve Borg, Resistance. What's happening, brother? Good to see you. Charlie, hey. Great show Friday. I know. Christopher Gardner. I can't wait to have him back on again. We could have a good chat. That was really cool. I know people aren't into it, but it was really cool talking football with somebody who played for Nick Saban. You know what was really interesting about that interview? This is astrological. And I'm not saying this to like kind of get over on Christopher. I would never do that. He's too cool of a guy. But he's a sidereal guy, right? He's sidereal. So I asked him, I said, what's your sign? And he says, well, Western, I'm Pisces, but in sidereal, I'm more Aquarius. I'm like, okay, all right. So he's more of a sidereal guy. And so we started to talk about Nick Saban. And I don't know if you guys caught the show on Friday, but Nick Saban was somebody who really taught him something about himself and kind of played a bit of a major role in his life in a lot of ways. And I looked up Nick Saban's chart during the show. Nick Saban was the coach of, at that time, he was the coach of the Michigan State Spartans. And now he's the coach of the Alabama Red Tide, right? Or whatever they're called. I think is it the Red Tide? Roll Tide Roll. Anyway, so Nick Saban has, I think, the true node in Pisces at 6 degrees, and Christopher's sun is right on Nick Saban's true node. It's like, to me, that's just a total Western Placidus tell. Like, right there. There it is. Okay, here we go. I think Robert is just smelling ozone. It's like butt ozone. No, I know what ozone smells like. It's not, it's an ozone. It's more like poo zone. Let's see. Equist expression. What's going on? Jeff Rosen. What's happening, Jeff? Happy Father's Day to all the fathers. Indeed. I think all this extreme weather is engineered. I would agree with that. Let's see. Rama Lama. There are more than one Schumann thingy, and only one is malfunctioning. So Rama Lama is our doomer boomer. And I wanted to see, well, maybe she's got some insight into this. I'm going to throw this up here. And if you guys in chat, if you have some experience deciphering these Schumann frequencies, you put it in chat. Let's see what you got. I'm not there yet, but we'll get there. Schumann is off because all the electroculture Chris is implementing. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe Chris is working out some kind of karmic thing where she took down Atlantis. Chris does have an overly curious appreciation in connection to Atlantis. Harriet Bowie, what's going on, Harriet? Let's see, that wasn't ozone. I know what ozone smells like. It was not ozone. Meow meow. Today I was totally energized. No one was out, so Costco was empty. The laundromat was empty. So you're saying that you were the omega man woman, right? That's what you were saying. You're practicing for the post-apocalyptic freedom, the breath of fresh air that's available once everybody else is gone. Oh, quite frankly, I was looking to have you on the show next week. Talk about, yeah, I'd be into it. Frank and I talk via direct message on Twitter. Yeah, I'll be on anytime he wants. Veronica's Barn is here. What's happening? Mary Lee. I should play Survivor for Mary Lee. I, the Tiger. Tondar. What's happening, Tondar? Happy Father's Day to Tondar. Happy Father's Day to Tom. He's a father. Call of Aldebaran. Yes, you made it. Good job. Bill Smith. Evening back. Echoist expression. Who else do we have? Got a good crew here. A Squirrel. I was conceived in 69. So, yep, I'm in that slice. Curtis Moonflower. What's happening, Curtis Moonflower? Good to see you. Got a good crowd here tonight. The school is here in mass. Good for them for standing up for their own opinions. Look out for Gen A, man. They're badasses. They are badasses. And these are the kids. These kids, you fucked with them. Not you who are watching the show, but the people who decided that they were going to endorse mask wearing, lock down things like playgrounds in schools. You people don't think that you have gone unnoticed in their minds. You are etched firmly in their brains for fucking with their childhood, and they're not going to forget it. They're not going to forget it. So I'm putting all of you worthless plutocrats on notice that there's an entire generation that's got your number. And at some point in time, they are going to come for you. They're going to come for you. They're going to come for your programs. They're going to come for your programming. And this is a generation that will get what they want and need. Pluto and Capricorn is potentially quite ruthless if they're crossed in the wrong direction. So I'm just saying. The breakaway, takeaways, energy bomb straight to null perception, aka the tapestry. I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds great. Let's see. Who else do we have? Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey. Millennials get a bad rap. I would say to some extent, yes. Because I've met, trust me, I've had lots of millennial clients, and like I've met some really good millennials when, solid, like really solid. And at the same time, when you look at their astrology, you have to look at it in a way that matches up with the culture. And they have certain elements to their astrology, for better or worse, that put them in a place where they're either going to be a force of good and come up with some creative solutions for the world that we're in, or they will be in a position where they'll be given a lot of power and they'll help burn this fucker down. Right. And and as an astrologer, I can see both sides to it, but I can't not address what I think is the core thread, to what I would call the dark magic of the millennials. And it was really interesting. I was on, I guess it was astroseek.com, and they have this little thing where it's kind of a fun little game where they have a picture and you guess that person's sign, or you try to. And if you get it right, whether it's the rising sign of the moon or the sun, they'll let you know. And I would say that the majority of the people whose pictures I was trying to guess were millennials. They were just in that age range. And there was something about all of them that was interesting, just in terms of their look and feel. Like at a certain point, everybody just started to look like a fucking Scorpio, right? I'm like Scorpio, because they have that kind of Scorpio, that kind of smoldering Scorpio intensity. They all have it. And it's kind of sexual, it's kind of witchy. It's also a little bit kind of ironic in some ways. Not like, you don't get the full like smiley, grinny energy that you got like maybe with like the boomers in the 50s or maybe the early 60s, right? It's just that, the grin. You don't get that with, there's something kind of mysterious and slightly smoldering about the millennials. I'm just like, oh, that's Scorpio. No, that's Scorpio. That's Scorpio. And in actuality, they all Pluto and Scorpio. So yeah, to some degree it is. And that's how Pluto really kind of vibrates and moves through generations. You can actually see the emanation, I think, of Pluto through generation. All right, let's get into the astrology of the now. Let's do that. Let's go. Let's go here. And let me get into chart selection. So let's do this, and then let's get into this Schumann frequency stuff, and then we'll bounce around a few other things. Let's see, where are we? All right. Okay. And I'm going to try to get us in here in 2 hours, because there's actually something I want us to do at the end for one of our Chatarians. Whose birthday is today? Boris Johnson. He's a Gemini, just like Trump. Born in New York City. Who else do we have? Paula Abdul. Paula Abdul. Hell of a dancer. Salman Rushdie. I saw Salman Rushdie with, what's his name? Christopher Hitchens in Berkeley. It was wild. I was with my friend Stephen Kent, and he decided, he asked me, hey, you want to smoke some hash? I'm like, yeah, sure. It's Salman Rushdie. He's from the Middle East. That's what they do there. Let me get into the frame of mind so I can mind meld with Salman Rushdie. and we went in, and it was at the Berkeley Community Theater, where I saw The Clash many years before. And it was a trip, man. Salman Rushdie is a really bright guy, really, really bright guy. Today's Nick Drake's birthday, the late, great Nick Drake, who has one of the weirdest charts. We looked at him before. The hip hopper, Macklemore, it's his birthday. Who else? Kathleen Turner from Body Heat. I run just a little bit hot. It's her birthday. Let's see who else. Zoe Saldana from Avatar and also Guardians of the Galaxy. Let's see. Chico Buarque from Brazil, Tropicalismo. It's his birthday today. So today or tomorrow? Tomorrow, the 19th. These are all tomorrow birthdays. Tomorrow. We're ahead of the curve. Paul Abdul, the science fiction writer Pierre Angeli. Let's see, Chico Buarque. Who else? Nick Drake, the aforementioned Nick Drake. Tragic figure. We looked at his chart, man. Very intense chart, sad chart, actually. Let's see who else. We talked about Macklemore. Anybody else? Anybody cool? Pauline Kael, the film critic, good writer, hated most movies. Let's see. And Blaise Pascal. It's his birthday today. The great thinker, Blaise Pascal. Zoe Saldana, and is that it? Are we good? Oh, Jimmy Walker, Jimmy JJ Walker? No, he's a lawyer. Jimmy JJ Walker's a Cancer, if I'm not mistaken. All right, whose birthday is it today? And we'll drop into this chart at the moment. Let's see. Today's birthday, Sandy Alomar, baseball player, father of Sandy Alomar Jr. and Roberta Alomar. Let's see who else. Richard Boone, Maverick. Not Maverick, no. Have Gun Will Travel. Interesting character, Richard Boone. Very interesting character. Kurt Browning, the what was he? He was a figure skater. It's his birthday today. Today. And we're talking today now. Let's see who else. Anybody interesting? Roger Ebert. Yeah, that's fascinating. So Roger Ebert and Pauline Kael, two significant film critics, born on consecutive days. That makes sense. In Gemini. Let's see. I used to love Siskel and Ebert. That was such a great show. And Gene Siskel died really young. He was an Aquarian. I usually like Gene Siskel's reviews better than Rogers. Who else today? Barbara Higbee. She's a musician from the Windham Hill scene. It's her birthday today. The actress Carol Kane. She's a Gemini. Today's her birthday. Amanda Lear. That makes sense. Amanda Lear was one of the first transvestites to show up on an album cover. She was on a Roxy Music album cover, and she became a disco star. From He to She, one of the firsties, Amanda Lear. Gemini, of course. Thabo Mbeki, I think that's a playwright, if I'm not mistaken. Who else? George Mikan, the great George Mikan, probably the first of the modern basketball players. It's his birthday today. And Bruce Smith, I believe, from the Buffalo Bills, it's his birthday today. The all-time sack leader in the NFL. And who else? Well, that was weird. Isabella Rossellini, David Lynch's ex-girlfriend. Oh, that's weird. This door just opened. Hold on a second. That's really weird. The spirits are here.
Yeah.
No, not even close. All right, we're back. We've secured spirit door. All right, let's get into the chart of the moment. No more messing around here. In fact, let me dial it up. Why don't I just do that? We won't use their paltry selection. Let's do a full flesh chart on the show. All right. Let's do this. It's 8:10 p.m. Okay, here we go. Here we go. We're dropping down in it. All right, here we go. We got a new moon. Weird new moon, right? Coming in.
What?
It's coming. My mother's trying to get in and be a part of the broadcast here, and I'm saying that she hasn't finished her astrological studies enough yet to come on the show, but she'll be there. She'll get there. All right, so let's look at this. Okay, so there we go. It's like a really weird new moon. It's like not really like, when you get the sun and the sun is just moving into, its sign, whatever the sign is. And then here comes the moon. Yeah, here I come along. Right. And then, hey, you're not my kid. Right? I mean, that's kind of what it's like, it's like the sun is expecting another Gemini and out pops a Cancer. Like, oh, well, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, clearly we had this new moon, but it's really at kind of the edge of the moon. Like it's at the edge of the moon. It's not like the moon is at 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like just kind of getting ready to move into Cancer. It's a weird appellation for the moon, but now the moon is clearly in Cancer. And I mean, how can we look at this chart and try to understand potentially what some of the weather patterns are? I'd have to look to Uranus, and because we're dealing with the Schumann frequency and the Earth, and it's at the third decan, which puts it in the Capricornian decan, which is interesting, right? To me, that's like the order out of chaos decan. When it's in that Virgo decan, I think it's even kind of more skitsy and it has that more of a mutability to it. But I don't know. When I see Uranus at this degree, it's almost like the Capricornian forces are trying to harness the power of nature in some ways. That's what it feels like. And even with the square with Mars, and to a lesser extent the square with Venus, like it is very, very disruptive. It's a very disruptive energy. And if the worst of it is me have to run out and move my car because of the ping pong size hail, I mean, that's great. if that's the extent of it. But Mars is moving forward here. And Mars is going to move into a tighter square with Uranus, which is really disruptive. Very, very disruptive. Violently disruptive, to be honest with you. And that even gets into the Trump astrology, which we'll take another look at tonight. Venus is going to get there. Venus, I think, goes retrograde at what, 25 degrees or something like that. End of July, Venus goes retrograde. So we have that to look forward to. But yeah, I just think that Mars here is just going to become more and more explosive. Uranus is going to go retrograde, and that's going to happen. Let me see if I can fire that up. Okay. So let me look at this here. So Uranus hits a 23 Taurus, and it retrogrades on the 29th of August. So we still have a bit of a journey there, but it will go retrograde. And before that, of course, we're going to get into this Mars square. So the Mars square, let's hone in on that. Let's hone in on that period. So we're talking exact 2121, 2152, 2134. So about as exact as it gets is 2116 for Mars, 21 degrees 16 minutes, and 21 degrees 29 minutes. And then Mars overtakes Uranus at that point. That's an interesting day, the 26th and the 27th of this month. And then Mars actually moves ahead of Uranus in the square. So those 2 days, I think, are pretty important days, just energetically. It's almost like there's a spark. There's a big spark that occurs during that square, and literally watching one planet kind of, move ahead of the other, and it's that inflection point. Here, I'll show you. Did I show you guys here? It's the inflection point, which is right here. Right here. So here's Mars at 2116, and then there's Uranus at 2129, and then Mars moves ahead at 2152, Uranus at 2132. That's the inflection point, those 2 days right there. 26th and the 27th of this month. High intensity inflection point. Let's see what Mars is doing at 21 and then 22, Leo. So it's interesting. It's one of these strange kinds of progressions that occur in the Sabian symbols. The Sabian symbols are all double blind. So for Elsie Wheeler and Mark Emmon Jones to come up with 2 bird images back to back, considering that they didn't change them, that they're being faithful to the original sequence of the symbols. So the 20 Leo is Zuni Indians perform a ritual to the sun. Seems appropriate with Leo, doesn't it? But it says 21 and 22. 21 is intoxicated chickens dizzily flap their wings trying to fly. That's a really interesting symbol. Like what is up with the energy during that time? What are people going to be doing during this Mars-Uranus square? Intoxicated chickens dizzily flap their wings trying to fly. Are people going to be losing their minds? Is that what we're looking at here? Are people going to attempt things that they're not really either physically or spiritually prepared to try? Let's read this. In Near Eastern symbolism, wine, intoxication, and vineyards always refer to ecstatic experiences and to the contact with mystical or occult schools. Chickens here suggest that we are dealing with human beings who are the standardized product of their culture and more or less undifferentiated specimens of a social norm, brought accidentally or prematurely to mystical or occult experiences. They usually react to them in a highly confused and dizzy manner. Well, if this thing with the Schumann frequency and whatever they've got going on with these technologies continues to interpenetrate our subtle bodies, I mean, what are we looking at here? You know, we're looking at people who have lost their bearings. And I'm wondering how much this also is attributed to pole shift. Like, how much is this? What's really going on with the poles right now? You know, what's interesting is, you know, we went through this whole thing with Trump in 2016, 2017, and it was a major disruption. Like, I don't think people understand how major that was to happen at that time, whether you believe it was, you know, engineered or whatever, right? It was really disruptive. There are disruptive energies that are happening right now that have nothing to do with Trump. Nothing. You know, whatever. And this is always how I felt about him and him being on the scene. That's what he was there to do. Nothing more than that, right? Like, I never considered Donald Trump to be a great leader of men. He was barely a great leader of business because he went belly up more than once, whether it was his own fault or not. But what I did consider him was to be a first-class disruptor. And now, you know, we're seeing like this interesting kind of pole shift, like the school of Massachusetts that we were talking about, that Sarah was talking about, or Sandra rather was talking about. Like, there's a pole shift that's, you can feel it. Like, you can begin to feel the energy starting to change. Like, even last night in Los Angeles, where they had, I guess Friday night, where they had, you know, maybe about 1,000 people, maybe more, at Chavez Ravine Stadium protesting what they believe to be an absolute desecration of the Catholic religion of Jesus Christ and the nuns, the real nuns, not the fake nuns. And I hadn't seen anything. I've never seen anything like that to that degree. I haven't seen it, right? Haven't seen the Catholics come out in force as Catholics and protest something like that. And the game itself was really underattended because they were playing the Giants and they're both in contention. And the Giants are pretty good this year. You would think that would be a night that everybody would show up, and they didn't have it. They didn't have the numbers. Most Dodger games sell out, by the way. They've been that good for such a long time, and they're kind of a hot ticket in Los Angeles, and they weren't even close to a sellout. But so I'm bringing it up because of this idea of pole shift. And we think of the poles as being, you know, the magnetic poles here on the planet, right? Obviously. But it also, I think, could be related to what's going on with people and the pole shift that's really taking place. We have been so indoctrinated, really deeply indoctrinated with a particular political persuasion for a very long period of time. very long period of time. And it's taken some critical mass to get to a point where people are ready to just kind of throw off the shackles here. Now, you may say, well, let's throw off the shackles of the right as well. Well, maybe. Right. But there are things that are inherent to the protest at Dodger Stadium. It had to do with morality. It had to do with morality and true decency and respect for religion. Doesn't matter what the religion is, happened to be their religion. If the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence dressed up as Arab Muslim women in burqas, what do you think would happen? Oh, there'd be hell to pay. There'd be hell to pay. Absolute hell to pay. What if they dressed up like rabbis, with the big fuzzy hats, and they did all those lewd acts and put grease paint on their face, and they looked like Harlequin rabbis? What do you think the SPLC and the ADL? What do you think Jonathan Greenblatt would say? Right? There'd be a big furor around the whole thing. So this is kind of significant. So we're witnessing a bit of a pole shift. Like Major League Baseball had the pride logos on their uniforms for one day, and that was it. Starbucks ended their Pride Month celebration. They took everything down inside all these Starbucks across the United States, maybe North America. So something is happening, right? There's a pole shift, energetically, spiritually, and philosophically. And I think a lot of people are coming off of this idea that there is a kind of a benign social and political force in the world that seeks to distribute its kind of organizing principles to the broadest group possible with the most amount of compassion and empathy for all. I think a lot of people are coming off of that, and they're seeing how that's been weaponized. And when we get into that true note in Aries, we're really in very different territory. And again, this is kind of a precursor to it all. It's this idea of a pole shift. And so, what happens when there's phenomena, people act strange. When there's phenomena in the natural world, animals will act strange. Sometimes, we've seen large numbers of birds just fall out of the sky, maybe due to 5G or HARP or whatever, right? We've been watching these killer whale attacks happening on the East Coast. Like what's going on there? They're acting strange, right? There's something going on in the field. And it feels to me very pole shifty, because we're seeing it in our world, right? If we're talking Gemini, this is what it's about. We're seeing the phenomena of what happens for people when they go through a pole shift. I played this interview with this woman who was a dyed-in-the-wool progressive from San Francisco on my show last week, and she woke up. She took the red pill, and it happened because her kids couldn't do anything during the lockdown, and she was harassed by her neighbors, by fellow San Franciscans, by the people that she worked with at Levi Strauss. She was a VP. She wound up getting fired because she was outspoken against the lockdowns and masks and all the things that her kids couldn't do. And of course, San Francisco is a city of Karens. There's some good people in San Francisco, don't get me wrong. It's a city of Karens. And they went after her. And so she, I guess, quit her job, or she probably quit her job, and she left. She left San Francisco, went to Denver. There's your pole shift right there. Here's your pole shift. 4 years ago, that woman was very different. She was happy. She was living probably near Alamo Square, right? And taking her kids out, to the parks there. And, she had her nice 6-figure cushy gig at Levi Strauss, being a VP of brand, I don't know, direction or understanding. I forget, something like that. And now she's completely shed her skin in 180, right? That's what's going on. So people are doing this. People are figuring things out finally. And it's not, I don't think it's indistinct from what's going on with the polls, period. So something's up here, right? At 21 Leo, this is when we have this weird Mars thing happening, the square with Uranus, and it goes from just being behind Uranus, just being in front of Uranus. This is the degree that it happens at right here. So let's read this a little bit more. Brought accidentally or prematurely to mystical occult experiences, usually react to them in a highly confused and dizzy manner. See, Dane Rudyard is basically defining this through what's happening in the 1960s. He's talking about people who go too high too fast, and then they try to do too much, because that's what was happening in the 60s, where it's through, some form of meditation or LSD, right? He's like, okay, you're all crazy little chickens. You're trying to be like eagles. Just be a chicken. That's what he's talking about in this context. If I were to reinterpret the Sabian symbols for where we are now, it would be different. I would have a different description for this symbol. I would. Anyway, let's just keep reading here. The first symbol of the 29th fivefold sequence presents to us a picture of the unsatisfactory way many people today, especially young people, approach what purports to be spiritual reality. The food may be intoxicating, conscious expanding, but the inner openings lack depth and constructiveness, whether or not they produce what appears to be wonderful feelings. One may speak here of the danger of premature expansion of consciousness. Okay, well, that's an interesting interpretation. Again, it's culturally defined by what was happening in the 60s with Rudyard. And I think maybe what he might also be inferring is, like, how did the chickens get intoxicated? Did they eat something with a rye mold that gave them a weird heightened sense of being something other than a chicken? How did they get intoxicated? It's a question. I don't know if we really need Rudyard's cultural description. I think what we can infer with it is that these chickens are fucked up and they think they're something that they're not. And they dizzily flap their wings. So to me, this symbol is about an approaching crisis. And this is the degree that Mars will be at when it squares Uranus. And we got, what is it, at the end of the month, we've got a few days before this happens, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. What's 22? A carrier pigeon. This is weird, right? So sometimes this happens. But again, these are double blind in terms of their sequencing. A carrier pigeon fulfilling its mission. Spirituality in terms of training for service to mankind. Okay. So this is in contrast. You have the chicken who's intoxicated, and then you have the carrier pigeon with a purpose. So something comes out of this very quickly where there's a message being spread to people. Like, people are getting the news. Something's happening here. Communication is being carried on the wind. Spirituality in terms of training for service to mankind. In contrast with the intoxicated chicken, we now have the successfully trained carrier pigeon delivering the message it was its function to carry. Here, the domesticated bird is seen endowed with special significance and purpose. This refers to spiritual energies which are being used constructively and which bring to the consciousness messages from other realms. Oh, interesting. Individual realizations acquire their true meaning only as they fulfill a collective function. This second stage symbol clearly presents a contrasting alternative to what the preceding picture revealed. The release of higher energies becomes effective and valuable to the extent to which it serves a higher but concrete and definite purpose. This is the ideal of the world server. Interesting. So there's a shift between these two degrees, and this degree at 22 delivers the message. So I suppose if we are open to what's happening during this degree of Leo, right, where we see things that are unusual, animals doing things that they normally shouldn't be doing, attempting to do things that normally they're not able to actually do, right? There's something about that, and then the symbol that follows it, which is a message. What's the message? So the Sabian symbols, they work in threes, and I don't know what the next one is. So we're in it together here. In a circus, the bareback rider displays her dangerous skill. So that's very Leo-like, if you ask me. And the audacity and perseverance required to control and play with the powerful energies of the vital realm in human existence. Okay. So to me, that represents, some degree of bravado and risk. And maybe that's what you're supposed to carry out once you get the mission. Once you get the mission. It was almost like a fucking glitch there. Felt like max headroom. Okay. Let's move on. Let's get back into the chart of the moment. So the whole idea here is we're trying to understand what's going on with the earth energies, and then the point of conflict inside the chart, where there's that friction, that frisson, that tension. And those are the degrees that we looked at. 21 and 22. Okay. Here's that true node right there, 2 Taurus. So we're really feeling, I think, the Aries energy. The Aries energy is definitely coming on. And we're just going to see more of it. And again, I reference, even though the protest at Dodger Stadium or Chavez Ravine was one that was religious in nature, it is a martial protest. Anytime you go out and protest, to me, it's a combination of the signs, really. To me, it's Aries and Aquarius. Aries is that there is kind of a call to arms, an ideological call to arms. In Aquarius, you're in a group setting. In this case, we have a little bit of Pisces and Sagittarius blending in because of the religious content. And I think that's important to note and to understand. Yet I believe it was on Friday, we were really kind of in the throes of the last degrees of the Gemini moon, the balsamic moon. And that moon was squaring Neptune in Pisces. So again, it's going to bring people out, right? And what's interesting is the crowd just really was not up to Dodger standards. But yeah, we're in this Aries territory, and Chiron's getting very, very close to being at 20, which is the Chiron return of the United States. And that happens every 50 years. So the last time Chiron was here was 50 years ago, right? Do the math. So we got 23. That brings us to, I think it was 1970, right? I think 50 years ago, 1973. 1973, thank you. That's when Chiron was here last. It's kind of the end of the Vietnam War. So the Vietnam Wars were wearing down and running down. 73, 74, by 75, it's over. So the Chiron return for the US represents the winding down of the Vietnam War. And then 50 years prior to that would put us into 1923, which is the Roaring '20s heading into the Great Depression, right? So that's where we are with that. Man, is YouTube that far behind? Like, I'm watching the screen here, and I've got the ephemeris up. Is it that far behind? I hope not. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's better. So what's going to happen with the Chiron return? We had the Vietnam War wind down. We had the stirrings of the Great Depression every 50 years. So that was significant. I think at that time, if I'm not mistaken, it's also when they're going after Nixon in Watergate, 74. Another part of the Chiron return is Watergate. And first time a standing president, I think since Jackson had been impeached and fully impeached, like out of the office. So Chiron and Aries will bring some gain. It'll definitely bring some gain. I feel like we're kind of on the precipice of war. You know, we're in whether or not, you know, it actually happens. I think we're very close. To me, that's what the true node in Aries is about. And I think a lot of people, just in general, are they're sick of conditions. They're sick of the corruption. They're sick of being lied to. They're sick of being told how to feel about certain things. People are really fed up. They're totally fed up. Hold on one second. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of a break here, and I'm going to play a video, and I'm going to be back in about 5 minutes. So give me a little latitude here, and we'll definitely be back. Don't go anywhere. We're just getting started, and we're going to have a great show tonight. Just need to tee a few things up here. Now this is YouTube, and I gotta watch my my copyright strikes. So let me find something here. Let's go. What could I do? It's interesting. Something I haven't played before. Right, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's play a little Orpheus, Jean Cocteau, and Stepping Through the Mirror. Let's do that. And we'll be back here in a minute. We're gonna make it silent. Hold on a second. All right. Thanks for waiting. Take care of a little business here. Anyway, let's go back to the chart at the moment and kind of wrap that up, because I do think that there's something in the air, and it's the shift, right? It's the nodal shift, because we're in it, and things get very intense around the degrees of the nodes, but you can also feel the next wind blowing, right? The next spirit of the node is beginning to address itself. Taurus Aries, the idea of security, right, bundled up in those first degrees of Taurus, and then moving into the 29th degree, which is an interesting degree, because that's where the node will go. 29th degree varies. And then 28, and it really springs into action. We're not that far away. Let me go back to quickly the chart at the moment, and then we'll get into this Schumann frequency stuff. And then we'll go to some talk about millennials, Trump. We talked a little bit about the true node in Aries already. We'll kind of wrap it up there. All right, let's do this. Let me go back into the chart. Again, thanks for your patience. All right. So the other thing too is right now that moon is in Cancer, and it's very intuitive, right? The Cancer moon is really instinctual, very, very instinctual. So by late tomorrow, it's moving into square with Chiron. And it feels to me like people have an intuitive sense that something's up, even more so than today. Even more so than today. It's temporary, but it is, again, because the moon is new, right? So there's an influx of potential and experience. That's what the new moon represents. Everybody born on the new moon is all about experience. It's like an empty cup, and they just want to fill it. And in Cancer, right, the empty cup, it's first of all, it's fresh, it's new, but it's also very receptive. Very, very receptive in Cancer. And when, the square with Chiron is kind of like there's alarms in the air. There's alarms. People are alarmed. And again, this is very instinctual, because that's how the moon in Cancer operates. Cancer itself is a very instinctual sign. And by the way, we'll be there in 3 days. The sun will be in Cancer in 3 days. So we'll have Cancer, and then the moon will be off and running in Leo at that time. So we've got a transition of luminaries happening in 3 days. So that's going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Wednesday, 0 Cancer. That's an interesting Sabian symbol. You know, we know that to be the symbol of on a ship at sea, a sailor lowers one flag and raises another. So we're in false flag territory. It's also the summer solstice. So we're creeping up on the summer solstice here, right around 0 Cancer, right? That cardinal ingress into the equinox season. So we go back and we look at December of last year, which is in many ways the seedbed of the equinox. And so what was going on with you in December of last year? And how were you planning your theoretical intention during that time? It's hard to remember because it's always around the holidays. So a lot of us are swept up in activity. But these 2 points, right? Like what happens during the autumnal equinox and the vernal equinox are vitally important. Like what do you do during that time? Well, it comes to fruition, you know, during the harvest season, which is in October. And the same could be said for this other process from Capricorn to Cancer. So if you look back as to where you were on the winter solstice, see if there's any relevant or common themes. It's considered to be the most magical and witch-like day of the year, even more so than Halloween, the summer solstice. It's also William's birthday as well. So it's a pretty magical day. And looks like it's going to be, they won't be scoring off against Chiron. The moon will be there first, ahead of time. But it will ultimately, 17 degrees into Cancer, we'll see that Chiron square again. What else do we have? Anything else happening here? Neptune Sun square. Also, that's the peak tonight, is the Neptune Sun square. It's interesting, you know, when I look at the sun, to me, it's the father in the chart, right? And then Neptune is squaring it here on Father's Day. You know, I wonder what kind of meaning that has in general for men as fathers in general, right? Like, where are we with that scenario? Being a father, how does society? To me, society has always responded in much greater energy for Mother's Day. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Mother's Day is a much bigger capitalist and corporate bonanza. You've got flowers, you got candy. Like, nobody really says, hey, go out and buy your dad a new set of Craftsman tools on Father's Day. It really doesn't play that way. I mean, maybe sometimes, but there's just much more of an economic investment in Mother's Day. Yeah, the energy is interesting, but it's almost over. Tomorrow, sun will be at 28, and maybe what we're still looking at here is some answers. Right, we're kind of navigating through the cloud of Neptune in a lot of ways. When the sun moves into Cancer and it starts to trine Saturn, that'll be very interesting. A lot of the value stuff is really going to pop, and the religious stuff as well with Saturn and Pisces. That'll be a very interesting transit. I think you're going to have a lot of talk, both positively and negatively, about what it means to be an American, what it means to be a theoretical nationalist, how religion plays a role in a national identity. That's going to be a very interesting 4th of July, for sure, and what's leading into it. And again, for a lot of people, they're having their eyes opened around what's going on here. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with this Mars square with Uranus. It feels very tense. And yet, at the same time, between those two symbols, there feels like it's again, a bit of a turning point. Can you stay clear enough to get the message? I think that's the question. Sun in conjunct Pluto. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. To me, that's whistleblowing shit. That's behind the scenes whistleblowing Gemini. Somebody's going to drop a bomb kind of information in the inconjunct. And again, this is a very interesting inconjunct because we already have Pluto in Aquarius, right? So last year, did we have an inconjunct with the sun in Gemini and Pluto? Sure, we did, but not at the end degree of Capricorn. We didn't have that, right? It's like this anaretic inconjunct. It's like, oh, well, look what we discovered. And you thought there was nothing there. Interesting. This is a very interesting week. Very interesting week. Okay. Thank you for still being here and being patient. Let's get into the Schumann frequency stuff. I wanted to put this up and I wanted to ask you guys, I literally want to interact with you guys on this because I think there are some people in chat who probably understand Maybe we'll see. This thing is off the fucking charts. Look at the patterns on this. The patterns are crazy, right? I mean, you have this pattern here that looks like, for all intents and purposes, an all-seeing eye. Like, what is going on here? And the people, the guy who put this up on Twitter, who says that he's a Schumann frequency guy, he doesn't even know how to interpret this. Like, these images are wild. I mean, look at this. What is going on here? And here, right? And then this is a trip. And then you have this upper bandwidth up here. And again, it seems like it's kind of a mirror of this, but there's something else happening with the frequency up here. Let me go into chat real time. And I would love to see what you guys think about this. Let me see if I can speed this up, get into real time. Okay, so what do you think? It's a meaningless glitch. Okay. We are good, rolling with reality. Okay, good. It's the pre-shadow now. Oh, host. Venus will do that July 23rd, along with Chiron. I'm feeling very Mercury retrograde today. Okay. So are you, okay, Mishi, are you saying this is a meaningless glitch in the Schumann frequency? I'm just curious. That's what I want to know. Can anybody interpret this? Because this is not usual Schumann frequency stuff. From what I looked around, I poked around. Yes, I usually feel the energies of it before I even see it spike. Some days I'm glued. My guess is we were winning against the controllers. You know, that's an interesting guess. I would say that that's possible. All right, let's see what else do we have. Does this come from Russia? Wow. I've been watching it for 25 years, never seen this. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Getting ready for the solar flash. Does off the charts have a different meaning when astrologer says it? It's a good question. Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? That is pretty wild shit. This almost feels like something from the movie, like Signs. This almost feels, dare I say, alien. This has an alien vibe to it to me. It feels like something's trying to communicate. A meaningless glitch. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. But this feels like some form of communication. Does anybody else get that? Does anybody else get that this feels like some kind of communication? There are no dynamics. Waveform, they're totally squashed. It's never looked like that before. That's what people are saying. Whimsical farm girl, they're here. The ones in Italy and elsewhere are normal. Okay, so why is it different here? Could it be that this is a localized effect? I'm just curious. This one is in Russia. Okay, thank you. I knew you would know. I knew you would know. Nama state of mind says 12-strand DNA activation. The ones in the oils are normal. Interesting. Blood will spell creepy crawlers from the earth. When was this data charted? I think it's from today, if I'm not mistaken. I got it from some guy named Derek Bros. On provocateurs of blood will spell creepy crawlers. Spell or spill creepy crawlers from the earth, maybe. Anyway, this is really a trip. I guess it's from Russia. Thank you for clarifying that. That's your Schumann frequency. or in frequency. Okay. What if they have any other, speaking of the latest? The Schumann frequency. Let's see if we can get a capture of it in real time. No, I don't want that. Let's see. Schumann frequency generator. Let's look at it. Oh, they actually have Schumann frequency generators you can buy. Interesting. You can get them at 7.83 hertz. The natural heartbeat of the planet. Right there for $27.57 on Amazon.com. How about that? You want to set your own Schumann frequency? That's what you got. All right, let's take a look at millennials. Let's get into some millennial stuff. So here we go. Okay. Millennials, Pluto and Scorpio. That's the key. Neptune in Capricorn, Uranus in Capricorn. Now, by the time we get into 96, Uranus is moving on. Right? Uranus is moving into Aquarius in 96. But it's still, Pluto's still in Scorpio. There's a retrograde of Pluto in Sagittarius back. Pluto shows up in Sagittarius 1995, retrogrades back into Scorpio, moves ahead in 96, and retrogrades one more time back into Scorpio. So by the time we're at the end of 1996, Pluto is committed to Sagittarius. So those are, and again, 1984 just really starts to happen there. Some people born in 1984 and to some extent 83 might feel like maybe they're slightly millennial in some ways, even though technically speaking, they're still Pluto and Libra. But they're beginning to carry the burden or feel the intensity of the wave coming on with Pluto and Capricorn, or sorry, Pluto and Scorpio. So, you know, looking back in that time, for me, as I experienced Pluto and Scorpio, it was very intense. It was just incredibly intense. From 1984 really through about 1996, that was kind of the height of, in some ways, my esoteric occult phenomena in my life. That was a huge period for me. So there was definitely something in the air. And I felt like in many instances or cases, even myself, I was a lightning rod for phenomena during that time. So if that's true, and I believe it to be true, then this is a group of people who were born into the fold of that phenomena, meaning that there is the potential for prodigious psychic, occult, and paranormal ability with the millennials. And I've always felt that. I felt like that was in many ways their biggest burden, was how to handle the intensity of Scorpio, the power of Scorpio, the magic and the tragic of Scorpio, because there's a tragic side of Scorpio as well. You know, it's being consumed by something that you want too much. You know, I see this with, in a lot of ways, like the Golden State Warriors. And I'm going to delve into sports a little bit, but I think it's a reasonable sort of analog to make. So the Warriors, the big three for the Warriors have been Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green, and they're all millennials. They're all Pluto and Scorpio, and they've been very, very successful. You know, they've been outside of LeBron James really since about 2015, 2016, last 7 years, the Uranus cycle. 2016, I believe they won their first championship, and then 2023, they won their last championship. Right. I mean, let me see. Let me go back. No, it's 2022. 2022, when they're last. So 2023 is the Denver Nuggets. But they're all very, very Pluto and Scorpio. And so what you have with the fan base is a fan base that identifies intensely with, if you're a Warriors fan, you identify intensely with Clay or Steph or Draymond. And, I see this, and they don't want the dynasty to die, right? They just want to keep somehow like just getting one more win. This is the fans, and maybe the players are kind of like this, but I think the players are in a different space. The fans, we got to maximize Steph. We got 3 more years. Like, they got this fucking guy, Steph Curry, on life support, and they've got to just, get everything out of them that they can. Oh, we owe it to Steph to get as many I mean, to me, it's a really Pluto and Scorpio kind of relationship with the team and what they stand for, right? There's this obsession, and it's like, okay, well, maybe they should blow it up. Or maybe in true Pluto and Scorpio, and I think they will, not because that's what their mandate is going to be, but that's just because how Pluto and Scorpio rolls. And sometimes it implodes and it goes down in flames, right? That's how Pluto and Scorpio is supposed to operate. There's no middle ground here. And I always felt like this generation was different than other generations with Pluto. And if you do the astrological math, it's because they are the first, what I call transpersonal generation. Pluto in Libra is not transpersonal. Pluto in Libra is kind of the dividing line. Libra is the dividing line in the chart. It represents the gateway between the upper realms and the lower realms of the chart. And in Libra, it really is the gateway to the underworld with Scorpio, right? So Libra guards the gates of the underworld. Beauty. It's beauty that is the gatekeeper of hell in some ways. It's interesting that I chose Orpheus, because Orpheus really does go to the underworld. That's what that movie is about. It's the retelling of the tale of Orpheus through the surrealistic vision of Jean Cocteau. So, and even with Cocteau and art, art is the artifice that is the doorway or the gatekeeper to the underworld. It's the point of Venus is the point of seduction, and it takes you into the underworld. That's the beauty of the 7th house, right? You meet somebody, you have, you lose yourself, you lose your commonality with the other, and then you journey into the underworld together. You journey into the realm of sex in union. The dissolving of two becoming one takes place in the 8th house. Scorpio is really very much associated and connected with these themes. So this is a very interesting generation in that regard. The first transpersonal generation. So for me, they're the generation that kind of thinks alike in a lot of ways and moves alike. Even though they won't say that, I think that there is a commonality with Pluto and Scorpio that really connects them through their intensity. And even when you watch, a team like the Warriors, and you watch Steph and Clay and Dre play together, they have that ability to be like the birds that just fly like as one mind. And I think Pluto and Scorpio has that. They can approach this idea of one mind or one idea, or for all intents and purposes, one social construct in a lot of ways, even though they're linked together by extreme sorts of expressions. And again, I've maybe she's watching the show, but a good friend of mine who I love dearly, she's a millennial, and she's one of the most self-sufficient people, most independent people you'll ever meet. This is not somebody who, is trying to get somebody else to pay for their way, or, this is somebody who's fiercely independent and, very respectable and good at what they do. Right. But at the same time, she's like, yeah, I just like to see this whole fucking thing burn down. And that is a common theme. That is something that, even though she has what I would call really, sacred values. She has sacred values, and she has a determined sense of being responsible for her inputs and outputs into the world. She still has the same kind of end game picture that somebody who might be considered woke would have, like burn it down. It's the same kind of outcome, right? It's the same conclusion, even though they're wired differently. And I'm not saying that all millennials are like that, but that's kind of their role, right? That's what Pluto and Scorpio does. It burns things down. It takes things to the foundation, and then it's supposed to kind of be rebuilt on the top of the bones and the ashes of the previous world. I mean, Pluto and Scorpio has this as part of who they are, right? This is part of what the millennials are here to do. Can the millennials do it in a way where it's a controlled burn? I don't know the answer to that. They're just now really starting to get into power and look at the advertising, look at the agreements that corporations are making, and front-facing products and brands in ways that make everybody else or a lot of other people not just feel uncomfortable, but want to walk away from those brands. So what is Budweiser doing? Budweiser is being burned to the ground. This is what's going on here, right? And so we look at somebody like Dylan Mulvaney is not a millennial, by the way. He's Gen Z, if you can wrap your head around that. Melissa Heierscheider, whatever her name is, she is a millennial. Late Pluto and Libra, but she's a millennial. I'll put her in that camp. And what did she do? She took the kerosene and she threw it on the brand and she lit it on fire because she thought it was just going to be fun. We need to lighten it up and take it out of the knuckle dragging ages, right? That was her idea. So this is what Pluto and Scorpio is supposed to do, right? And now they're moving into positions of power, which to me, if they're the right Pluto and Scorpio, I don't have a problem with it, right? But the right Pluto and Scorpio, they're not going to move in that direction. And that brings us to Neptune and Capricorn and Uranus and Capricorn, which I think also really determines this generation. Capricorn, again, represents sort of the theoretical pinnacle of society, right? That's what it represents. And with Neptune in Capricorn, there's a lot of disillusionment in systems and administration in the world. That's just how Neptune rolls. A lot of disillusionment. And if you look at, again, this group of people, and what they have taken on in terms of student debt and things like that, I completely get it. And there's a huge amount of antipathy between millennials and boomers. And a lot of millennials can't stand boomers. So you have Pluto and Scorpio squaring off against Pluto and Leo, right? So you get that fixed square, and they're just not into it. They're not into the boomers. And the boomers aren't their parents. The people who are theoretically their parents would be people my age. And so I'm really consider myself a boomer. Not that I would have a problem with it, but I just don't fit the model. People born like post 1958 have a hard time fitting into the boomer world. We're like the second kid, and the boomers are the oldest kids. We're Peter Brady, and the boomers are Greg Brady, and Gen X is Bobby and Cindy, right? So these generations they don't mix well. They really don't mix well. And when millennials look at boomers, they look at people like Donald Trump. They won't look at Joe Biden, really, in a lot of ways. But he's in the mix, right? Joe Biden and Donald Trump are separated by 2 years. So they're both technically boomers. And maybe some millennials hate Joe Biden. I know they hate Donald Trump, without a doubt. You have some millennials who on the other side are like slavish to Trump. I would assume that somebody like Laura Loomer is a boomer. I mean, a millennial rather. So there could be that other side, that extreme other side of the millennial perspective. But Neptune in Capricorn is about being disillusioned with the system and being disillusioned with leaders and fathers and parents. And Uranus in Capricorn is like, having a very unusual relationship with the system. So let's look at, again, advertising. Uranus is different, right? You're going to get different models. You're going to get different brands. You're going to have, this is where the millennials are. If they're in that position, that's where they're executing on the vision. It's Uranus and Capricorn. We're going to flip everything upside down. Everything that was a hierarchy in Capricorn gets flipped upside down. These are the agents of the flip. That's what these are the people that are doing it, right? And this is a group where, as they moved into college, right? In college being, if they were born in, let's say 1985, they were moving into college in 2005. By 2005, the colleges had been well on their way to being taken over. And essentially the cultural Marxists were really, they'd stormed the gates, and by the early 2000s, they were in place. I remember hanging out with this, this woman who I knew. She worked at a school in somewhere in the East Bay. This was in the early 2000s, I think, or late 90s, one of the two. But these were definitely millennial kids, like first wave millennial. And I think it was like the late 90s. And she was a counselor at a school. And some of the stuff she told me about these millennial kids was shocking, right? It was really, really shocking. And a lot of it had to do with sex. And they were doing things with sex at that age that at my age, I mean, certainly I might have wished to be part of what they were experiencing, but I didn't, right? In my adolescent brain, oh yeah, that sounds great, right? But that shit was happening. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to be graphic, but I was hearing stories about middle schoolers that were graphic, really graphic, and troubling to this woman who was a counselor. She didn't know what to do with this information. And this is Pluto and Scorpio, very extreme. And another, I think, byproduct of Pluto and Scorpio is also when it comes to drinking and drugs. They will just drink and drug till they fucking pass out. And then we'll start again. Right? This is a very hardcore generation. And they're starting to really hit now, right? They're being moved into positions of power. Late 30s, and we're about to approach the early 40s here. And when you look at Neptune in Capricorn and you look at Uranus in Capricorn, one dissolves the culture. That's Neptune. The other, Uranus, is going to what? It's going to invert things. It's going to have a very different relationship with the culture in general. It's not going to be traditional. It's kind of like, yeah, all those things that you used to be into, right? Like mom and dad and apple pie and baseball, oh, fuck it, they're gone, right? This is how Uranus and Capricorn operates. And it's like, well, we'll take care of it now. This is our show. This is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is a poster child for the millennials, right? And, she just comes right in and says, okay, well, here's the Green New Deal. We're going to do it. That's shocking. Neptune and Capricorn, I didn't take her seriously. It's like, oh yeah, right. How much is that going to cost? And now, do I take her seriously now? You bet I do. Not because she's somebody serious to take. She's not. But the agenda that is running through her is absolutely something serious to take. And that, to me, that's Neptune and Capricorn. Like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. How could this ever be plausible? How could this ever work? And then you see it and you go, holy shit. Like, and then Uranus, well, who thought of that? That's just like, like who thought of bringing the Satanist line into Target for Pride Month. It's like some Uranus and Capricorn shit. Neptune and Capricorn, they're completely and totally deluded. They're deluded. They actually think that the marketplace is there for this kind of imprint. Somebody, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of when I used to work at Long's Drugs in the Bay Area. And I used to hang out with this guy who ran the beer cooler. And he was a buddy of mine. And I used to look at all the lists of the beers that he could get. I'm like, hey man, get this, because I wanted to try these beers. And I knew that if we got these beers in, it's probably a pretty good chance. I never stole any beers from the store. I never stole from the store. Never. I never once did that. I can honestly say I never took anything from a store I worked at. And I worked in that kind of retail world for a little while. But I would buy the beer, or I'd have somebody buy me the beer. I was like 18, 19 years old. But that's what it was like. It was like, okay, well, hey man, get this, try this. But it wasn't that far afield. I mean, you know, we got this beer from Alaska called Prinsbrout, and nobody from the fucking Bay Area had ever heard of it, but I wanted to try it. Did it eventually sell? Sure it did. Somebody drank that beer. But it's a mild version of this, right? Like, let's try this. Let's get this. And they're like just tone deaf. You know, so where's the tone deafness coming from? Is the tone deafness coming from the fact that they think that that people are ready for this, that they think that you know, with Uranus and Capricorn, they got to break a few eggs and make an omelet? Is that really where it's coming from? Are here's the other part now, are they malicious? That's the other question to ask. Is there malice that is connected with people who are basically now millennials, not all of them, but a lot more millennials, who are driving the advertising and marketing programs? Is there malice involved? Is this part of Pluto and Scorpio where it's like, hey, fuck you, you know, fuck you, we're disruptors, and we're going to disrupt your lily white colonizer, you know, dream that you're in? I mean, is that part of it? And I don't necessarily, I mean, yeah, sure, there's ideology involved. And sure, there's the relationship with what's gone on in schools and what they're teaching and have been teaching. But this is a generation that was kind of ripe for it. This is definitely, you know, even when you get into Scorpio, you know, you're into other people's money, right? That's the other thing with Scorpio. When I think of like Lenin, who's a Taurus, by the way, but when I think of Lenin and I think of the Bolsheviks and the conflict between, you know, socialism, communism versus capitalism, I think of Taurus and Scorpio. I think of the Taurus and Scorpio. No, Taurus is you put in a good day's work and you're compensated, you know, by the sweat of your brow and by the fruit of your labor. I mean, that's Taurus. Scorpio is not like that. Scorpio, somebody else could pay the bill. Scorpio is like, well, we're gonna get this thing and we're gonna get all this money, and we don't have any capital to draw from. We have social capital, and that's what the Bolsheviks did. They had no money until the bankers in Wall Street, somebody else's money, financed a revolution. And that's what happened, right? There was no money there, and all of a sudden it appeared. And that money helped turn the tide in Russia, buy people off. There's a lot of corruption in Russia. The Bolsheviks were able to buy a lot of people off and get them on their side. And then once they got them on their side, they executed them. It's a very Scorpio thing, isn't it? In a lot of ways. So when we get into Pluto and Scorpio, this is a big topic of conversation. And, you know, you're going to hear more and more about things like reparations. And to me, that's very Pluto and Scorpio. You know, okay, now we've got to compensate somebody else for the sweat of their brow and the salt of their labor, right? Well, I don't know. Is that really true? Or is that just a byproduct of a group of people who are carriers for a certain astrological assignation that might be just across the board in some ways, and that just being one of many perhaps topics or manifestations where other people's money or the government's money or whomever's money. It was kind of like when we were going through the summer of Floyd and stores were being ripped off right and left, and people were saying, oh, don't worry about it, the insurance will pay for it. Like, that's very Pluto and Scorpio, or that's Scorpio, that's eighth house. That's other people's money, right? And the physical manifestation or the taking of that is Taurus. So, we've been in this really interesting nodal effect with the true node in Taurus and the south node in Scorpio. So we're seeing a lot of these things fleshed out, and the final degrees of Scorpio are giving us some insight. We're getting a window to the world, these last 2 degrees of Scorpio. And part of it has to do with millennials and Pluto and Scorpio. And another part of it has to do with, things like corruption and the kind of the venal sexuality that's being promoted. Like all the creepy underworld shit is just kind of rising to the surface in these final degrees of the south node in Scorpio. So, the millennials they're a very powerful generation. They're very, very powerful. And what's interesting about them is that sometimes their power is not in numbers. They can have a small group of millennials, but because they're sort of magnetically aligned to social, philosophical, maybe not so much religious ideas, but social, philosophical, economic ideas, when they bind together and they become a force. Do not underestimate the millennials. They're very powerful. They're extremely powerful. And it doesn't take a ton of them in order to move things, right? Like we're seeing that. We're seeing a small percentage of a group of people come in and you really begin to, move the needle. And you can put whatever kind of, I don't want to use the word description, but you could assign any meaning or value to who's behind it. And it doesn't really matter because this is the group that's kind of executing it, right? It's a demographic. So let me talk about the positive aspects of millennials. I think that when they are kind of monofocused and on track, like this is a generation that could create parallel culture if they were interested in that, right? They were really, really interested in unhooking from the system, right? That they could create parallel cultures. If they don't like the way things are, instead of trying to force the dominant paradigm to swallow the communion of wokeism, right? Which isn't really a fit in a lot of ways, but what they could do if they wanted to was, I don't really like this version of the system, so I'm going to create my own version of it that reflects the values that I have, whatever those values are. Let's say, and I know this to be the case because I don't know these people directly, but I know their age group. I know who they are, and they're millennials, and they're in this area, and they didn't like the way beef was being treated, right? So then what did they do? They decided that they were going to, grow beef and oxen and buffalo mostly buffalo in a very different kind of way. That they were into this whole idea of regenerating, sort of pasture land and prairie land. They're millennials, right? They're going to transform something that, again, when you deal with something like meat and how meat is, farmed and processed, it's brutal. There's a brutality around a lot of it. But this is a group of people that said, we're going to change that. And we're going to do it in a more humane way. And in fact, we're going to do it in a way where, the prairie land, the pasture land is going to be regenerated. And these animals are vital and important to that whole process. See, that to me is where the genius of the millennials are. And if they don't like something, they have the ability to transform that thing, right? And maybe it's driven by ideology, or maybe it's driven by, some kind of quasi-political belief or philosophy. But when they get it, they get it. And they can do tremendous work when they decide that they don't have to get anybody else to reflect their world, right? It's like the negative, to me, this is just me, with Pluto and Scorpio, the negative connotation for the millennial generation would be, you have to reflect our values. Your values are outworn, outdated, right? You have to reflect our values. These are the new values. And if you don't reflect the new values, then there will be a penalty assessed to you for not doing that, whatever that penalty is. Well, those values may not even really be all that substantial, to be honest, right? They may not be all that substantial. They just may be reactive values. Instead, what do you have? You have the other version, which is, you don't have to reflect our values. We're going to set our own values. We're going to do our own version of the thing that we think the thing that we want you to do, and reflect back to us. That's the difference. And to me, when the millennials stake out that territory, they're really powerful, and they have the power to create really deep and intense change at a cultural level. But it almost feels like, in some ways, they have to do it independent of the culture itself, because, you know, we're in a culture war right now here in this country. And it's not just like millennials and boomers. You know, it's not that, right? When you see like the Muslim community in where is it? Was it Michigan or Indiana or someplace like that? And they're just going off, completely going off on, you know, their children being forced to come in and accept, you know, a syllabus around sexuality and identity. Like, that's a war, right? And that war has been put into place by people. And I'm just going to be honest with you. A lot of the people that are putting these things into place are millennials. They're putting them into place. And that is not a war that you want to get into, right? And I know there's a lot of divide and conquer stuff around all this too, right? Which is part of the mix. But it's like, we're going to represent these values, and we're going to force feed you these values. And in Scorpio, there's no negotiation, right? There's no negotiation. You're not going to sit down and have a conversation and say, well, you know, Pluto and Libra will have a conversation. At least they'll sit down and have a conversation. They may not agree with you, but they'll have a conversation. Pluto and Scorpio, by and large, generally won't, right? I mean, I don't want to get pinned into a corner here. They will. Individually, they will. But as a kind of, you know, collective, it's no. That's a no. Like, you know, we're not going to have that. We're not going to entertain those ideas. Just by having the conversation, we're giving you oxygen and air to breathe, right? But that's not where they're at their best. They're at their best when they say, this is not, I don't agree with this. I don't like it. I don't agree with it. I'm going to change it. But I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to make other people, you know, conform to the change that I want. I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to make the change. And if people conform with it or want to be a part of it, that's great. And if they don't want to, I'm not going to hold them accountable for it. I'm not going to make them get into this binary Pluto Scorpio thing. You're either in or out, right? Because there is some of that with Pluto and Scorpio. You're either in or out. But I think this is an incredibly powerful generation. And, you know, if we come out of the ashes of something, there will be some millennials who you're going to want to know. Trust me, you're going to want to know them. Because there are some millennials that have been working on putting skills together. I know this for a fact. And, you know, in a time where, you know, order out of chaos, you know, the people that are here after the fire are the ones you're probably going to want to, you know, break some bread with. Either that, or they'll break bread with you, or bake bread with you, or bake you. I don't know. I mean, this is a very intense generation. And I have a lot of respect for them, to be honest with you. And at the same time, you know, I can also see where culturally they're, if they have not gone through the fire, if they have not gone through the fire, they're problematic. I'm just being honest. So going through the fire would be whatever that constitutes. Like, losing somebody is going through the fire. Losing a child is going through the fire. Losing a father or a mother is going through the fire. And when you go through the fire, you're in a place where if you're going to make change, there's parts of you that have been burned off, right? Whether it's the ego or whether it's some kind of agenda, right? That's the fire. And again, from the outside, right? This is a generation where, whether it's fair or unfair, they've been titled the everybody gets a trophy generation. That's not going through the fire. And that's not to say that some of them haven't. I know they have, but that's not going through the fire. Every kid getting a trophy or everyone feeling that they're special ultimately leads to a form of insulation and never failing, right? Never failing. And so what happens when you fail? What happens when, to me, it's like kind of like Draymond Green. When he was like riding high with the Warriors, he was fucking great. But when Klay Thompson got hurt and then Steph got hurt, Dre sucked. He just gave up. It's like, well, if I'm not winning, I'm not in. And that's exactly what happened. He just kind of sucked, couldn't carry the team. He knew it. So he was done. He's like, I'm done for the season. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of the millennial way, and he had not really experienced that before. He came up, he played with Michigan State, quite good, second round pick. But as soon as he got to the Warriors, they started winning. And I'm sure when he was young, he played on youth teams, they probably won. They did pretty well at Michigan State, played for Tom Izzo. I think they might have won an NCAA championship, maybe. It might have happened when he was there. And then the first time shit got hard, what did he do? He tapped out. I'm not saying all millennials are like that, but it's kind of that, right? And what's interesting too is like even him, from his perspective, he was not willing to even acknowledge the fact that he fucked up by punching Jordan Poole. Couldn't even apologize for it. Even after the whole world saw it, he was like at a loss. And to me, it's like you got to go through the fire, man. If he will, trust me. We all do. We can't escape, those kinds of things, those kinds of transformations in our life. That's part of being here. Yeah, I just wanted to spend some time with the millennial thing. And again, I have to read, because a lot of times people will hear what they want to hear. They'll say, oh, you fucking hate millennials. No, I don't hate millennials. I don't. But I'm also cognizant of this, right? Pluto and Scorpio, Neptune and Capricorn, Uranus and Capricorn. This is their impact on culture. Right? This is their impact on culture, for better or worse. So I'm cognizant of that. And as an astrologer, I have to talk about it. And here you go. That's our dissertation tonight on millennials. And God bless them. I love them. Really. I mean, I have millennial clients, and a lot of them are just really switched on and with it because they've gone through the fire. The thing about millennials is I can approach them in a session and can talk about anything, right? Like they're like, let's go there. Okay, we'll go there. Like, okay, good. That's the other side. When they're in that mode, when they're ready to go deep, into their Pluto, it's a very interesting group. The other thing with Pluto and Scorpio, and I've talked about this before, and this is a generation that is also very unreconciled with death. And when the whole COVID thing happened, there were two generations that were, I think, the worst offenders for COVID. It was the boomers and the millennials. The boomers and the millennials. The boomers just didn't want the party to stop. Let's just keep going, right? Keep traveling. We're going to travel. Let's get shot. We're going to travel, right? It's like, oh, fuck. Why are you doing this? Like, don't get your fucking shot just because you want to travel. Please. Just say no, okay? So I think for a lot of the boomers, it's convenience. For the millennials, it wasn't. Millennials, it was like death, fear. It was the new religion in some ways. It also set them apart against other people. There were some boomers that were anti-shot. There were. I guess Donald Trump could have been a poster boy until, of course, Operation Warp Speed. But you never heard. It's funny with Trump, even with Operation Warp Speed, nobody on the other side ever sung his praises. And I'm not here to support him for that, but they never sung his praises. Like, yeah. You're supposed to do that. Fuck you. All right, let's talk about Trump. Let's do a quick Trump drive-by, and maybe I'll take this up on with our friend Frank this week. There we go. Okay. So here we go. That's our president, former president. They keep calling him president, right? Don't they call Obama President Obama, President Bush, President-elect Bush? They stopped doing that with Trump. They started calling him Donald Trump or Mr. Trump. Anyway, here's Mars going through the gauntlet, 12th house, behind the scenes, right? Enemies. Uranus getting very close to his midheaven, gets to 22, and then it retreats and comes back one more time. Also, the true node getting ready to move into Aries, and Aries in his 8th house, right? The house of Scorpio. Neptune is already there, has been there for a while. Pluto retrograding, going back and opposing Saturn one more time. So Pluto goes to 27, and that's going to be an interesting retrograde. I wonder where Trump's allies are going to be during that retrograde, because Pluto will move forward again, and we know it moves forward because all the way to 0 Aquarius, comes back, retrogrades, and comes back again into 29. That's an interesting time. That's also legalities for Trump. I don't think they're done throwing shit at him now that Pluto retrograde opposing Venus in his chart. And if anything, I could see like his kids having to do the perp walk next. I could see that. Pluto retrograding into the 5th house. Yeah, I think he's still here in danger, right? And even when we get into that trine that square with Uranus at was it 22 degrees, 21, 22, right there. Mars right here, conjunct his midheaven with Algol there. Keep your eye on Trump by the end of the month. This brings up this one. Yeah, this is I wanted to play this thing for you here. Hold on. Where is it? Right here. This speaks to, I think, what's going on in his chart and some of the problems that astrologically and culturally the guy's facing. This is from a senator. Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett. Check this out.
Had the codes, having Trump not only have had the codes, but now having the classified information for Americans and being able to put that out and share it in his resort with anyone and everyone who comes through should be terrifying to all Americans, and he needs to be stopped. Having Trump not only have had the codes, but now having the classified information for Americans and being able to put that out and share it in his resort with anyone and everyone who comes through should be terrifying to all Americans, and he needs to be stopped.
That's what you call a Freudian slip. And that's exactly what she thinks. And that is Mars 12th house rhetoric right there. And we live in a world now where when things are talked about like that, what happens? Some people might even actually take that seriously, right? Somebody somewhere might be hit with some kind of weird voice in their head, or go shoot Trump or whatever, right? And this is a murmur. See, when you get into the 12th house, you're really in a very archetypal space, right? You have people, voices. They all emerge from the 12th house. Where do they emanate from? Who's talking, right? Is it just her having a Freudian slip? Or is she really like an output of Trump's 12th house? Where that kind of collective and archetypal energy sort of bubbles up and manifests in somebody like this dimwit, who basically confesses to the rest of the world that he should be shot. When you get into like a public figure like Trump, and everybody's so charged around, him and what he stands for, what he doesn't stand for, whatever, I think this is more than just a person uttering how she feels about the safety of America, right? She is a voice. She is a tongue in the vox populi, and she's uttering an archetypal kind of response to Trump's Mars transit through his 12th house. I think this is true. When you play at a certain level, this is how things emanate and manifest. All right, so I want to do one more thing, then we got to get out of here. And I promised I would do this tonight. I'm not going to do the I talked a little about the true node already in Aries. We'll talk more about it next week, but I wanted to just do something here real fast. And I'd like for you to join me for a moment. There's a member of Chattaria, and somebody who I've known since maybe 2014 or 2015. And so she's a good friend of the show and a good person. And she's a mother and a wife, and she has 3 kids. And her name is, some of you might even know her, Jillian Malone. She's the wife of Mark Malone. Let's blow up her face here. She's a wonderful person, great mom. And I said I would say something here tonight for Jill. She has stage 4 cancer in her breast, and she's got 3 young kids, and she has a really, really bright and talented husband who's doing everything in his power to find a cure for her that is not going to be like incredibly invasive with chemotherapy. And I think we all understand why a person would want to do that and the decision behind it. So I just wanted to bring Jillian's face up here. And if you are somebody who prays and want to say a prayer in your own life for this woman and her children and her husband, please do so. She's more than worthy of it. And, I'll do my best here and just in this moment, wish Jill and her kids and Mark nothing but a fast and speedy recovery, and that they learn everything they need to learn about the miracle of life by going through this. And whatever happens, I hope this brings them infinitely closer in their understanding of one another and life in God and the creator of all things. And in that spirit, I humbly, turn this over to the creator of the universe, and who has far more power than me or anyone on this chat. But together, through our intention and our understanding and recognition of her condition, we can affirm and decree that she clearly is worthy of any healing that comes her way, and however it comes her way, and that we wish her nothing but love and deep transformation and trust in everything that occurs in her life. And we do so with the intention of deep freedom and allowing what needs to be to the highest degree that it needs to be. So I hope that made sense. And Jill, we wish you nothing but the best, and to be able to come through this and stronger and better. And whatever you learn along the way is all part of your path. So if you can do it, and do it in your own way, this is a good lady and a good family, and share what you can. All right, that's it. I'll be back on Tuesday. Hang in there, everybody. It's gonna get interesting, very interesting. Anything else? True Hemp Science, great product. Go get some. Helped me out today. Took my edge off. The moon dust got me, man. It was a godsend. And if you spend $100 or more over truehempscience.com, type in 15MINS, and you will get free product with your order. And you'd support a mainstream business, or mainstream too. We're doing our best to make it mainstream. All right, I'm out of here. Thanks, everybody. Chattaria, mods, love you all. Take good care.